So one of the changes to the management authority is the inclusion of, and it's mainly the Real Estate Institute of Victoria, so the Vic Forms document, it's the inclusion of the provision to be able to charge from an agency, to the provision to be able to actually charge a new fee inside of the base set of fees. So normally there's the management fee, letting fee, and releasing fee. There's two other fees now that are included inside of that, and that is, the first one is, it's called a leasing or a letting fee. Letting, I think it's called. And for many agencies, we're charging around that 165 mark, which works out to $100 an hour plus GST by about an hour and a half. So it's the 165. You might find that you want to charge 220, which is around that sort of $2, 2 hours at the $100 an hour plus GST. But you are most welcome to, or are now allowed and permitted to include that fee into the new lettings. Now, it's only charged once. It's not an ongoing basis. And what it's done, what it's for, is for the agency to go and do the inspection, the initial inspection, as to ascertain whether the property complies from the rental minimum standards. Now, of course, we do ask the owner to fill in the document. That's fine. But often the owner is going to send us back the information, and it's too late for us to be able to then figure out from an agency point of view whether the property complies or doesn't comply. So what I've done is I've created a new checklist, and that checklist is 3.3 in the Trello board, and it is here. So it's 11 pages, and it's a combination of some of the Residential Tenancies Act, it's some of the Residential Tenancies regulations. It's also a combination of some of the information that was in the REIV document, plus some other questions that I've added in as well, and it's fairly straightforward. The agent would go out and fill this in. They would either sign it's tenanted, vacant, compliant, not compliant, they sign it, and they tick a box and so forth, and then they just go through, tick, 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 and write the information. So where was the lock? What type of lock was it? And take photographs as well. So the objective here is that, so here's the information that the agent needs to read, and then here, for example, on locks, take photos of all the locks to the external doors of the agency record, for the agency records, especially any of the items that have noted that have failed, and provide recommendations for capital works. So we've got the agent going out and doing an inspection on the property prior to us taking it to market. This is for a brand new business. They fill in this document, they write the handwrite, it's all handwritten, they handwrite the information, and they'll attach photographs as well. And they go through the next one. So you've got locks, vermin-proof bins, toilets, and so forth. Okay, so the 14 standards. So I'm going to move back to here. So that's the information there. So that's the checklist. That's the physical document. And then where we're looking at is the rental minimum standards are Schedule 4 in the tenancies regulations. So let's just come across to here. And here are the 14 minimum standards, which hopefully you're across. But if not, so I've pulled the information from here as well. I've tried to summarize the documents. And if we come back through to here, so that's one. Now the Act is really clear. Occupation of a rental premises that do not comply with the rental minimum standards. Let's just go to section 65A. So occupation of a rental premises that do not comply with the rental minimum standards. So if the property doesn't comply and you knowingly put a tenant into there, the penalty is for an individual 60 penalty units, or the agency is 300 penalty units, which is approximately $54,000. As of 2021-22. So the amount is $181.74 per one penalty unit. Multiply that by 300, it's around $54,000. And it's basically, it is, if one of these items does not comply, and for whatever reason one of the 14 points doesn't, and the property doesn't comply on one of the 14 points, and you knowingly put a tenant into the property, that's the potential risk. So it's $54,000 potential risk if investigated and found to be at fault or at breach. Okay, so come back to this one, and then if the tenant moves into a property, Section 91L, if the tenant moves into the property and they find that the property is in not good repair, unfit for human habitation, destroyed, they're not legally, they can actually, and doesn't meet the minimum standards, so F, rental agreement terminates if the renter has not entered into possession of the rented premises and has given a notice of termination. So, and you can't charge the tenant a break lease inside of that as well. So what's really important is that we're fully aware as agents of what the property looks like and does it comply. So my suggestion here is that and as I'll go through here, every property should be completed. So initially it's for brand new managements, but more importantly, I would be using the same checklist to go out and do the same thing for all of your periodics and periodic inspections for existing tenancies. So through the course of a year at least, all properties will be inspected by the agent. Now, the agency is going to have to absorb the cost. You're not going to be able to charge existing tenants, existing landlords for this, the rental providers, because it's already under management. But what you would be doing is going out and using the same checklist, this one here, create the same checklist and then store that on file. So at least you've got yourself covered. What you're trying to do is you, as an agent, it's your responsibility to make sure that you are providing the correct information. If a rental provider who's not been in the property for many years sends back through a document and then you just on forward that, or you rely upon that and not know yourself, therefore you are still at fault because you're deemed to have not negligent, you're deemed to have not inspected or investigated, followed up what you ought to have known. So that's why I've created this checklist. All new business, this inspection should be completed prior to commencing advertising if the property is vacant, or within the first 7 days if it's tenanted. So if you're sitting with an owner and their principal place of residence, their primary property, and it's a vacant property, and they say, look, we're leaving the property, organise it straight away. Use this as part of your listing presentation. Take the document to the listing presentation and go through, whilst you're there, do a bit of a visual and say, because I know that none of the other BDMs would be looking at this. So go through and start to use this as part of your points of difference, that you've got the 14 minimum standards checklist that don't ever leave it. You go through and you say, these are the things that we need to look for during the listing presentation. So you've got an opportunity to go through and one, it separates you, makes you look like you're informed, educated, knowledgeable, you know what you're doing, professional, but more importantly, you're onto it. Because at the end of the day, the owner is at breach here if they're going to, and then say to them, here's the form you need to complete. Take that with you. Take the REIV document, your own document, whatever it is you use. If it's Inspection Express, take those documents and give them a copy and say, this is what you would be needing to fill in. We will send this through to you. You need to fill this in. We need to keep a copy on file, but we're going to do our own inspection also. You can't have one or either. So it's important that the agency has their own copy, but more importantly, you've actually got the owner has signed off on their copy. So you've gone in for new business. Existing business, if the agency has not completed a minimum standards inspection previously, then recommended to do it at the inspections, next periodic, as I mentioned. So it might take you an extra half hour, 20 minutes whilst you're there. Or if you're going to do two up, so two people at an inspection, what you'll be able to do is one person's doing the routine, the other person's doing the minimum standards. And again, two separate lots of photographs inside of there. Please don't try and get one person to do both and put that into the condition report. I would most certainly, if I found, for example, I was out at periodic inspections and I found that there were locks that weren't compliant, or for whatever reason, some of the heating, whatever the reasons were, I would certainly add that into the routine inspection. Most certainly, because one, you've got a record of it, and two, then the owner's obligated to then, one, they know about it, but obligated to then rectify or remediate the issue. So once the checklist has been completed, I would be sending it through to the owner and saying, here are my notes. This is what I've also found. When you're filling in your form, you might want to use this as well. Once completed, the document should be scanned, properly named and dated, and make sure it's dated and saved in the property folder along with the corresponding photographs. So this is in one of the property folders, subfolders in the Rent Roll Maximizer system. It's got minimum standards, so you would do this and you would save that once. So you've got the 14 different standards, and you've got photographs for all of those, and that would be just the same way that you would for an ingoing condition report or a periodic or a vacate. you would keep all of that information sitting inside of there along with the scanned document. If the property is compliant, then adjust the labels and tags in either Property Me or our Property Tree, so that it's actually saying that the property is compliant and it meets all of the standards. So what you should be able to do if you're managing 500 properties, you should be able to actually bring up at a glance really quickly of those properties, how many are deemed to be compliant, and every other one is deemed to be non-compliant if it hasn't been inspected. So it needs to be, I would use an opt-out approach, and that would be all properties are non-compliant until we've done the inspection that they are. So that's the way I'd be looking at the tagging and labeling. If the property is deemed to be non-compliant, then adjust the tags and labels in property software as non-compliant until the items have been rectified. Any of the items that are non-compliant would automatically deem the property as non-compliant. So if you go through the checklist and you tick one that's no, then there might be 13 other sections which the property is compliant, but one would deem the property to be non-compliant. So the property needs to meet and comply with all 14 of the rental minimum standards, and some of those minimum standards have subsections. So, for example, ventilation is in every one of the rooms. You might have, say it's 7 rooms, you might find that in ventilation is fine in 3 of the rooms, but 4 it's not. So therefore that's deemed as non-compliant, and the whole property is now deemed to be non-compliant because the property does not meet the minimum standards. Owners need to be made aware of the item and then supported by the photos, and if need be, references back to the Tenancies Act. When I'm doing a listing presentation, I'd certainly be going through and showing the owners that. The fine for them, potentially $11,000, fine for an agency, $54,000. I'd also be then going through and highlighting this here, and if we do put a property, a tenant into a renter into a property, and it's deemed to be in breach non-compliant, they can request an urgent repair to have it the item rectified or remediated, and if the agent doesn't do it quickly enough, they can go off and spend up to the $2,500 themselves to do so. Owners need to be made aware. Record the inspection within the property management software as a rental minimum standards inspection. So I'm not sure whether your property management software will allow you to change the name of inspections, but if you can, change it to rental minimum standards inspection and then make a note that that has been done, so that can be clearly noted that on that particular day, inside a Property Me, I would be saving that as well, and upload the scanned document also with your notes. If the agency has updated the management authority and fee schedule to include a fee for this inspection, it's important that the inspection is charged. So if it's a brand new property, then it'd be a new schedule, and therefore it should be included. As I said, $165 is not out of order. $220 is still acceptable as well. Entirely up to you and your agency and what you feel is comfortable. And the estimated completion of the inspection would be somewhere between 20 and 45 minutes on site. So you obviously clearly got to drive there, you have to do the inspection, take the photographs, bring it back, scan. Any of the works that need to be done also need to be addressed, any of the maintenance capital works. Now I want to draw a distinction between maintenance and capital works. So maintenance would be an item whereby as part of the tenancy it has broken and it needs to be rectified. Capital works is something which is completely different and ought to be charged for. Again, within the new management authority, I have a provision whereby I would say to the owner, here are the 5 things that the property doesn't meet the minimum standards. Realistically, the owner is responsible to give you a property that does meet the minimum standards. If it doesn't, then by all means go ahead and try and fix that, coordinate tradespeople, go and do all of the work. However, what you should then be doing is then charging for your time to do so. Okay, so the property is either compliant or non-compliant. There's only 2 options. It either passes or it fails. So you can't be half compliant. You can't be almost compliant. It's either compliant or non-compliant. So of all the checkboxes, if there's any one of them that shows non-compliant, then the whole property is deemed to be non-compliant until that particular point is rectified. So the property is compliant. It's important to ensure that there is written and photographic evidence to prove that at the time when the renter took possession of the property, that the property met all 14 of the rental minimum standards. and the rental provider signed and dated. I'm going to get rid of that or. The rental provider has signed. The rental provider's signed and dated copy of the rental minimum standards checklist is also kept inside the file, and you are again more than welcome. And I would say it's actually a really good service to be offering that through to the renter. You don't have to. There's no requirement. A disclosure statement, yes, but the rental provider, rental minimum standards, I would be certainly, if it says yes, 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 there's absolutely no reasons why I wouldn't be giving that through to a renter before they start. There's no need to update the document each time there's a new tenancy. There is for a disclosure statement, but for the rental minimum standards, I'd be doing it every couple of years. I've said 2 to 3 or thereabouts years, or when there's significant changes to the property, or there's another trigger. So, for example, switchboards, up until 29th of March 2023, one switchboard is acceptable. After that date, a different level of switchboard and GPOs and so forth, and light fittings need to be within the property. So significant dates or changes, I'd be updating the document again. If the property is non-compliant, if it's uncovered that the property is non-compliant, does not meet the minimum standards and doesn't comply, then this would deem the entire property as non-compliant. I mentioned that. When the property is non-compliant, it's important that the items are addressed without delay. So you can't then turn around and say, when the rental provider can't turn around and say, when I get my tax return in June or July, I'm happy to fix up the heating. You can't do that. So it is. It's not optional. The requirement by the Tenancy Act is that the property complies before the tenant moves into, the renter moves in and takes possession of the property. That's the requirement. If it doesn't, but it's a small thing and it's being agreed to by the renter, and I've noted here that the renter is kept informed or made aware of the issue and is kept up to date with a rectification plan. So if, for example, there was a one smaller thing, it might be bins haven't been there. So that's not going to stop them from taking the property, but it doesn't comply. So therefore, what I would be doing, if the renter agrees and acknowledges the property is non-compliant, accepts the condition, then it's critical that this is noted in the rental agreement. You don't want to be in a situation where you had he said, she said, or a verbal communication saying, I spoke to the renter about that at the open and they were fine. It needs to be noted into the rental agreement. And in addition to that, note the renter has been informed. Also clearly outline what the process and timeline and the tradespeople who have been engaged to rectify the items. So that's what we need to have a look at. I'm not going to go through all of the 14 standards. That's a different thing altogether. I just wanted to go through and talk about the inspection and the process to follow the inspection. Hopefully this has helped because if we can do this inspection, if we can do this for all brand new properties, then it's going to make it so much easier for the property managers. So if BDMs can get this part right, it needs to be charged for because their time is really important. The other thing I'd be doing as well is I certainly wouldn't be, even though the owner's paid for it, I certainly wouldn't be transferring this document across at a transfer. There's no reason for you to give that information through to another agent. Let the other agent do their own homework on that one. So I'll just quickly go through the 14 standards. So you've got the locks, vermin-proof bins, toilets, bathroom facilities, kitchen facilities, laundry facilities, structural soundness, mold and dampness, electrical safety, window coverings, windows, lighting, ventilation, and heating. I'll come back to here again, and I'll just quickly go through this as we go through. So we've got the locks section inside of there, vermin-proof bins. It's just a tick, tick, tick. Make the note. Any issues, jot it down through there. And again, we're taking photographs. Toilets, same thing. Any capital works need to be charged, need to be actioned in through to there. Capital works is not maintenance. Maintenance is remediating or fixing, rectifying something which is broken there. This is capital work, so therefore there's no reasons why you wouldn't be charging additional fees to project manage the capital works. As long as it's written into your management authority. Bathroom facilities, and again, tick, tick, and this document, tick, tick. Kitchen facilities. And we've got inside of here, if the answer is no to the premises do not comply with minimum standards, tick, tick. Really important here, This one. This is a real, often agents get this wrong. The standards don't require that there's an oven in a property. So some properties don't have ovens, particularly student accommodation style, but require that if there is one, it must be in good working order. Now that's the same with all appliances. So I want to get to the heating one in a second, but I'll use this example now. Often there might be, say, for example, an old ducted heating, ducted air conditioning, either in the floor or the ceiling, and that no longer works. It's been decommissioned. It's old, and the owner's gone and put a new split system in, or a wall-mounted heater, or something of like similar to that. If the property has ducted heating, the vents are there, the ducts are there, it's all there. It needs to be in good working order, or removed. So there's nothing in the Act that says that the ducted heating needs to be removed. There's nothing at all, same as an oven, those sorts of things. There's nothing in there that says that it needs to be removed. What the Act says, it works in the other way, works in reverse, and says that if there is an item or appliance in the property, then it must be of good working order. So regularly you'll find that owners will argue the point around ducted heating. I don't want to fill in the vents and plaster and paint. They actually don't have really a choice. So the choice is not for you to tell them to sit there and argue with them that you need to pull it out. That's not the choice. The choice is that the owner has two choices, and that is if it's in the property, it must be working order. So rather than putting a split system in, get them to reinstate the gas heating, the ducted heating all the way through. And if they don't want to do that, then the default to that is that it's not in good working order, so therefore it needs to be removed. So you don't want to get into an argument where he's saying, and you won't be able to find it in the Act at all, that the owner has to remove an item. What it says is that the owner must provide the items in good working order. Kitchen facilities, laundry facilities, structural soundness, mould and damp. There's a lot of properties that have mould and damp, particularly areas that have recently been built, that are built to a high standard of energy efficiency. What they don't have is natural airflow or ventilation into properties. So as a result, and particularly high-rise, not a lot of openable windows, and as a result, you end up with mould and damp, condensation, those sorts of things that are happening by trying to achieve the Energy 6-star rating. Electrical safety, that's really from next year, so from March of 2023. Window coverings, each window covering needs to be block out. So if you can see straight through, that's not a block out. You'd need to either change the roller or put another roller over the top of that one. So sheer window curtains, that's not acceptable, particularly in living areas, bedrooms and those sorts of things. So it's either a pass, fail, or it's not applicable. And the not applicable is there's only one living area. There's no living area, for example, or it's the dining room, it's not applicable. And then I want you to write in there what the type of window cover it is, and we're taking photographs as well. Windows, do the windows, do they lock, do they sit open, are they lockable, is there a latch that will actually keep them open or closed or set to a particular position, and again the area, lighting, natural light, borrowed light, ventilation, really important, and then we've got the heating. Make sure you read this because heating is really quite important to make sure that we've got all of that right. The difference between a Class 1, Class 2. Class 1 type of property is like a single dwelling. It's a standalone. It's not multi-units. It doesn't have buildings above it and to the side of it and underneath it. So if you've got two townhouses, Class 1. Even if they're side by side, Class 1, because it's not actually underground above and to the side. If you've got apartments on top of each other, or maybe 2 or 3 or multi-level, then you've got Class 2 inside of them. I hope this information helps, and again, read through the actual points inside of there. That's just come directly straight from the checklist I just covered off on. Make yourself really familiar with Section 65A. Make yourself really familiar with 91L, because then you'll be able to explain to the renter the rental provider why they must comply with this, because otherwise the tenant has all of the rights just to vacate without penalty whatsoever. And really familiarise yourself with Schedule 4, the standards. That's where the checklist lives. Hope this checklist helps, and best of luck with it.